Hey guys, my name is Grant and welcome to GH Books. And today I am going to show you the 3 oldest books in my library. Let's get started. The first book I want to show you is called Great Britain and the Empire: A Discursive History by James A. Williamson. And the amazing thing about this book is when it was published and printed. Now, I found this at a garage sale and I looked through it, I was like, oh, a book about the British Empire. I'll take a quick look. I look inside and find the publishing date, and the first printing of this book was in 1945, January of 1945. And for any of you who know history like I do, that means this book was printed towards the end of World War II. And what's really astonishing about it is that in the UK at the time, they had heavy shortages of paper and lots of restrictions on what could and couldn't be printed. And so during World War II, there were far fewer books printed, and the books that were printed were far shorter. In fact, it's these paper shortages and regulations on it, which continued even after the war, is why Lord of the Rings was originally published into 3 volumes instead of 1 book like the author had intended. It's because of the paper shortage. Well, you see, this book here, it's pretty thin for a nonfiction book, meaning that it is definitely a product of the time. And the other amazing thing about this thing, what I found, is that this particular copy was printed in 1946. And it's a book about the British Empire, written by a citizen of the British Empire when the British Empire still existed, just before pieces of it started breaking off. You know, this particular copy of the book was printed probably a little over a year before India was granted independence from the British Empire. So that's pretty astonishing for me. Some of my sentiments that, wow, this is a literal piece. It's a book about a history from a period of history that was rapidly changing before the author's eyes. And so that is one of the reasons I love this piece, is the age of it and what was going on at the time it was being made. And that's a similar quality that you'll see with the next 2 books as well. The next book is by an author whose name you might be familiar with, Walter Lippmann, a pretty prolific writer, and this book, U.S. Foreign Policy: Shield of the Republic. Nice little hardback book, and this particular copy was printed in 1943, mid-World War II. Here you have Walter Lippmann writing a book about American foreign policy in the middle of one of the biggest wars of that century. And it just seems pretty remarkable, and it's definitely thicker than the book published in Britain. So you see, all the countries fighting in World War II had regulations based around paper. But you can see the United States, they were not nearly as severe. And because they were not as severe because the United States homeland wasn't directly under attack, and they just had far more of every kind of resource possible, the books were allowed to be bigger. But of course, that's just the amazing thing. It's by such a prolific person, Walter Lippmann, writing on such a big subject, American foreign policy, during probably one of the biggest wars of mankind's history. That is just remarkable. And I haven't had a chance to read this book yet, but it is near the top of my to-be-read list, simply because I want to see what these people were thinking at the time. You know, like, this book came out before the end of the war, which means it was being written from the perspective of nuclear weapons don't exist. So, what were they thinking at the time that U.S. foreign policy could be or was going to be? You know, in a pre-nuclear age foreign policy, it's just remarkable, and I'm definitely doing a review of this book at some point in the future, so stay tuned for that. Now, the third and oldest book in my collection is from 1940. So this is before the American entrance into World War II, but after World War II had already started, and it is called Know Your Government. And it is by 2 names on there, are Reed and Jensen. And this is the one book I actually have read of these, and this book, Know Your Government, is a citizenship guide. As in, this is what an organization felt that new American citizens should know about their country, and gave a study guide as to what they should learn, what people should know to prepare for the citizenship test. And in there it has a history, it gives a history of the American Revolution. It gives, a listing of the Constitution and different parts and what those parts mean, and the Declaration of Independence. And a lot of questions that you should know, and there's something a lot more elaborate than you would find today, one of the questions asks, give us a history of the settlement of the state you're living in. So they're not just, what state do you live in, what city do you live in? No, it's actually want to know what's part of the history of your state. And most people don't even know that today, which is just quite remarkable. I'm just flabbergasted by everything that's in here, and it's stuff that you don't see taught at all. These are things they thought that new citizens should know. New citizens should be learning this. And other questions, why was the civil service begun in the United States? What kind of government has this city? And so on and so forth. So many different questions. It's just remarkable. And one particular thing, you realize that one of the answers to the question of this would be different than today, is what territory, what are the territories of the United States? Meaning, not just what states there are, but what additional territories. And at the time this book was written and published, that would mean that the Philippines would be included amongst U.S. territory. And it's just quite remarkable realizing the time period this was written in, what they expected of people, and what their answers would have been. It's just quite incredible. And these are the 3 oldest books in my library, all written and printed in the early 40s, and just a wealth of history. Even if the knowledge in them isn't precise, it's just reading this gives you a little glimpse into the mindset of people further away, that people who were living through the thing that was happening. It's sure, we look back at World War II now, we think, oh, well, all these things were inevitable, but to the people living through them, that wasn't the case. They didn't know how it was going to end. They just had to try and live in the world that they were in. And for some of them, that world changed quite drastically before their eyes within a relatively short time period. And I think for our own day and age, that's a very important skill, trait, and lesson we should learn today. Hey guys, thanks for watching. Click the subscribe button. Check out some of the other videos on this channel or some of the other videos in the recommendation area on the end slate. Have a great day, keep reading, and I will see you next time.